welcome back. As I mentioned in one of our previous videos, I really wanted to get out and about a little bit more and see other people's projects and homes and whatever they've got going on to just kind of make it a little bit more interesting on the channel. And then to kick us off on that, I thought I'd come along and visit a friend's house. They're nice and local to us, good friends, and they've got a nice old house, a little bit older than ours, and it's a lovely old Somerset cottage. So I'm going to take a look, take you along, show you a few bits that are kind of standout characteristics of the house, and a few things that I've got planned, and they were kind of just asking me to throw a few ideas around to help them along. But yeah, I thought this would be a good chance to take a look at how to kind of read an old house, how to kind of try and unpick some of the mystery of what you see when you walk into an old place. So stick around, see how we get on. Just got to find it now. I think we're here. It's over there somewhere. Okay, here we are, and I'm going to make a start on one of the rooms, and then I'll show you the other side, which is slightly bigger. So I was just asking them, and they said it's 1820, so about 200 years old, the house. So there's a few things here which will have seen various different kind of traditions and building techniques, because of course when you've got an old house like this, it's probably been renovated, you know, a dozen times by the time you get to modern day. So some things you have to kind of pick apart to see what's original. Some things will be, you know, halfway through its lifespan, and some will be much more recent. So hopefully I can decipher a few of these bits and bobs for you, and we can kind of read a little bit into the history of what's gone on here. So one easy thing to tell is obviously external walls being original, but also when you look at the thickness of them, that's what really sets apart. Like an old stone building like this has these really, really deep walls, deep window sills. Even when it comes to internal walls, like this one here, this is the wall that they're looking at, kind of taking down and opening up between the two rooms. And a lot of the time you can tell a supporting wall fairly easily, especially when you've got exposed timbers like here. But this is a serious internal wall. We're talking kind of 2 foot thick, and that's just an internal wall. I'm not sure, I don't think that goes all the way up to the top. I think there's a stud wall on top of this, so actually it's a huge mass of stone right in the middle of the house. So there needs to be quite a bit of engineering there, and several steels, and potentially look at doing it in either a green oak beam, or because it's so wide, maybe boxing, making kind of a faux oak beam to go around the steels. So there's a few options there, but really thick, and that's kind of one of the things with the really old building, especially if it's been added to. When you start seeing solid walls this sort of thick, you know that that's probably early on, if not the original part of the building. Another thing to mention is these timbers up here. When I first came around, we were talking through different bits. They mentioned the holes that happen to be in all these ceiling timbers, and these joists would have obviously been original, and you'll see all the holes that go along. Now they were concerned that that was either like wood beetle, or maybe where treatment had been done for that, because the house being this old has got a history of kind of bits like that in the details that they'd received when they bought the house. And a lot of it had been treated, but actually these holes are nothing like that. If you've lived in an old property, you'd be well used to seeing these sort of timbers, whether they're stud walls, or whether they're ceiling timbers. This is where the laths, the wooden strips, would have been in order to carry the lime plaster. Being that it's gone through all the generations, and the kind of trend, I guess, for the last few decades will have been to stay traditional and expose what you can, and that's what's happened here. So all those holes are just historically what would have been there before. It's just kind of exposed that, and then what is there now is just infill of plasterboard, or sometimes that'll be kind of hardboard or something like that to seal off between them. And then I was thinking on the way here, even the fact that it had lath and plaster up there might not have been an original thing in itself. The house is 200 years old, and there's many houses around here which are older than that. Originally it may have been that these are just your joists that go across and the floorboards above, and what you see would have just been literally the boards above. And then when it came to kind of maybe the Victorian era, so similar era to when our house was built, when they were more into kind of smooth walls and plastering. So when these laths got put up might not have been when the house was built, if that makes sense. So it could have been that they are kind of halfway through that happened, and then now we're kind of going back to how it was. So a few bits like that. I'm no historian, but don't always think that what you see is original. It could be 100 years old, which is relatively modern. And one thing is for certain, this timber here is definitely original. You can see just the size of it over this huge inglenook fireplace. And I'll change the lens in a minute to show you a bit of a wider shot, but it's a little bit dark over here. So this has obviously got a history of wood beetle or something in the past which has been treated, and that's where you can see all this patina of where some of it's been eroded away, but you've still got this huge massive timber that really isn't anything to worry about too much. So originally it would have been a lime plaster in here throughout the whole house, similar to how ours would have been, and that would have been the ideal because it would have allowed the wall to breathe. You wouldn't have any issues with damp or condensation because everything could dry out naturally. And then along came kind of gypsum plaster. For the last 40-50 years it's been used a lot, especially here in the UK, and the go-to renovation would just be to skim over. And it's nearly every old property you see has been through that, and unfortunately you can't kind of, without taking everything back to stonework, you can't really undo that. So as soon as you see, another kind of simple way to see what plaster you got is you're looking for sort of a pale pink colour. That gives you a telltale sign that it's had a modern skim over the top of what probably is still there, which is the lime, which is a whitey grey, sort of much more crumbly, coarse plaster. And between that backing plaster and the gypsum, you might just have that thin layer of the lime finishing skim, which is a much smoother, but also a little bit flaky and temperamental. So if you're trying to maintain and keep that, you kind of want to don't chip around and bang around too much, because you loosen one bit and then the whole lot starts getting worse and worse. Whereas as a whole, it's fairly strong. We're working with kind of low light here, so hopefully you can make out what's going on. This wall here is the one that they're talking about removing, or at least some of it, to open up these two rooms. And it's fairly straightforward to say that that is original. We know that by the thickness of it, the fact that timbers are on there, so it's very likely that that's an original part of the house. But we move across to this wall, which again, you knock, it's solid. It's 100mm thick, 4 inches, so that's kind of, could easily be a brick internal wall. But then I kind of had a little bit of an investigation when I was here last, and I could see that this timber here was close to it, but not on it. So I'll show you what's going on up there. There's a gap here, and if I put my fingers up and top in there, I can actually put my fingers over on top of the wall, and I can feel that there's nothing sat on there, which means, yes, that's great. It's not supporting anything above that we need to worry about. But also you can feel the texture of it, and it's definitely not smooth like brick. It feels more like concrete. And then sure enough, if you have a little look up inside there, you can see the pink plaster, but also you might be able to make out there's definitely a concrete block there, and you can see that all the way along. So even without us chipping away a sample patch of plaster to see what is there and what the wall is, we can see, okay, it's concrete. It's got nothing on top of it. Concrete has only really been used domestically like that in the last, I don't know, 70 years, 80 years or whatever. So it's nowhere near as old as the house. So really all that is a partition wall that's been put in there. Now sometimes things will have been changed and they could be structural, but in this case you can tell nothing's on top of it. It's just really a heavy duty partition. So we're solid here, and then working along there's a bit of a hump and a crack there. You go along here, tap here, and immediately it's a really hollow sound here, which means this is all pretty much certainly stud work. And then where there's this downstairs bathroom, all of this side is hollow stud work. So that is really just the partition wall there. So if you wanted to remodel things, that could be taken back to a kind of a blank canvas really, and you could change out the layout here. Got to be careful what we're banging around because the kids are asleep upstairs, so we'll try and be as quiet as we can. But that kind of gives you an idea of ceiling walls in this end, and what's original, what can be altered, and what maybe has been altered already. Now let's talk floors. Traditionally, ground floor, stone house like this, solid floor. But you can sometimes tell as you go through a house there's different levels and bits being made up for either smoothing out for carpets or different laminates, and as things have gone through renovations, and what would have probably been nice big flags or stone in here is either still there and being screed over or whatever, or maybe it's been taken out. But under here, I think from what they said and from what you can see at the corner, it's just like a concrete floor or just some self-leveling or something that's poured out. And that's one thing I think they're really keen to address when they have the work done here, is levelling out the floors, because it's all the rooms are kind of maybe 50mm different from each other, then there's a step up into the kitchen. But also the floors are cold. Now, although you only really lose about 10% of your heat down, you lose more through the roof and through the walls. There's like a thermal comfort to having a warm insulated floor, which makes a huge difference. So you can have your fire roaring in a really warm room, but actually your floor can be so cold that you still got to wear shoes and thick slippers because you might be warm but your feet are freezing, even if you've got carpet. And a thick underlay or a rug really doesn't match actually insulating the floor properly. And putting underfloor heating down straight onto a cold slab, an insulated slab, is both throwing money down the drain but also not very efficient and still hasn't really solved the issue. So going back over to the fireplace, you can see it's a huge Great England fireplace, and I'm sure that a lot of these stones and brackets in here would have perhaps been there for when it was used for cooking and things like that. But if we come down to the hearth, this, I mean, real basics here, but this very hard material here with the flex in it, that's concrete. And under there, I imagine, is probably some nice natural stone, and it's just been levelled off. And you can see these ridges just where they've screeded it with, you know, a bit of timber or something like that. So there's almost certainly under there some nice slate or nice natural lias stone, which is on kind of local stones here. And then as you come down, there's evidence of the floor being damp, but also, yeah, you really want to really need to have a good pick away to see what's under there. You could strike gold and find some slabs, and it's just a weak mix on top that you could chip off and clean. Here's another sign of alterations. This wall, this may have been a wall here originally which came up, which is why the floors may have been different either side, and it's just been reconfigured. But that's something they probably want to sort when they come to do their work. Moving through, you can see it steps up again into the kitchen over there. Now let's go and have a look at the kitchen, because the kitchen gets even better when it comes to walls. So here in the kitchen, whether this was an original kitchen part of the house or maybe an outhouse and this was an external door perhaps, although that looks thin, but it would be an internal door. There's something about the walls in here which just set it aside slightly from the house. So I don't know if maybe this, I imagine it was the same age as the house, but there's some serious thick walls here. I mean, they're probably nearly a metre thick on this side, and this looks, I mean, I can't imagine that it was built to be that low here, so there's probably been some alterations as far as the door goes, and it might be that this floor in here was brought up, which is why we've got that step coming up in there, why this door appears to be really low. So this floor, for some reason, maybe it's got pipes running under it, or maybe they've just poured a new concrete slab in here, but I imagine that this would have been as low as in there. But, you know, unless you start taking a digger in here, you wouldn't really be able to tell that easily. Take a look at this for a windowsill. I mean, the windowsill is, I mean, it's wider than a doorway would be, and there's quite a reveal on the outside of the window as well, and the deep windowsill outside. But, you know, that is just absolutely solid. Now let's briefly talk paints. Really, with the whole issue of gypsum plasters being skimmed over lime, you've already done the damage there, but where you really cause issues is when you start painting with vinyls and silks and plasticky acrylic paints or whatever, and as soon as you do that, then you've created basically a plastic film. So no longer can any of the walls dry out if there's condensation falling onto them. So sometimes when you've got walls like this that have been painted and you're in an older house, especially in a kitchen, maybe here or the bathroom, then you might see water running down the wall and immediately you think you've got kind of damp issues or things like that. And actually a lot of it is just down to the paint or the plaster underneath. So again, old house like this, stone house like this, you really want to be looking at matte paints at the very least, if not clay paints or traditional lime paints. But again, we knock there, that's hollow, and there. So this seems to have been dry lined or plasterboarded actually. But this is obviously another part of the old house. Huge, thick, curved stone wall coming around here as well. And out here is just a courtyard, I think. So not sure quite the reason why that's curved off, but that is definitely original. And down here you can actually make out that's still the lime plaster actually. So there may be a thin skim over here, but all that is original. So we were talking about wood beetle earlier. Now the holes you saw from the lath are much more regular and obvious. Now, whereas this is actually the holes left from the woodworm or wood beetle. The only way you'd know if it was a live infestation is if you see the powdery, dusty stuff going on around the holes. When it's just clean holes like that, and it usually has been treated, and if you buy the house, it's usually been picked up on a survey as well. And then kind of coming through, we're just talking about where we might be able to move the wall for the downstairs bathroom. But here you come through and you've got that's the stone wall which joins this cottage to next door. So this is probably the sort of stone which will be within the internal walls when they come to get removed. We were just kind of chatting about how we might be able to reuse a lot of that when they come to do a rear extension. So when you take down a wall like this, or whereas this has been pointed up in cement, just the nearest side, but a lot of the lime mortar will just crumble right off and you end up with clean stone. So you can stack all of that out in the garden, and then when they come to build their extension off the back, they've got traditional original materials to start going, so they save money, and then they're also going to keep it in keeping with the house. Finally, this is the other side. So this is the wall that joins through to next door, which the wall is about just to the right of that picture frame. So the sections come down as this here. So when they come to do that, it's a case of, bearing in mind this is a thick wall, it's working out where these timbers stop. Do they go all the way through to the plate, or do they just sit on a plate this side of the wall and there's a gap before the other timbers start? So kind of need to work out what gets supported. But anyway, that's another thing to look at in the future. Again, huge, nice old big lintels here, and this one's seen some history. And when I say a solid wall property, or here where we've got solid stone wall, actually it's not actually solid. What you end up with is a stone face on the outside, which is what you see, and then on the inside another stone face which has been plastered. Now the inside of that won't necessarily be packed tight of stone and mortar. In actual fact, it's normally called a rubble filled wall, and around here that's kind of how a lot of the houses are built. So your stone may be, I don't know, 250 deep on both sides, and then the inside is much smaller stones, offcuts, and all the blobs of mortar all thrown in, and it builds up quite a strong structure, but you've got air pockets and bits, and I guess that probably helps the building to breathe a bit as well. But it isn't a sheer massive solid stone, it's much more loose in the middle. Another huge fireplace, this one's stone surround lintel. You can see the back here, it has been painted in like a modern paint, so that's why there's that sheen. And this side of the house, I'm guessing, is, do you get most of your rain from that side? The wind hit that?
Yeah, I think so.
So this end of the house has been rendered, which is a common quick fix for stone walls. If you've got kind of penetrating, driving rain or moisture coming through the walls, it's quite tempting straight away. The render goes up and it's painted, and yes, it'll stop it, but you can kind of trap stuff in the wall that way as well. But that's probably why they painted the back of the fireplace in the past with a sort of masonry paint to stop bits coming through, and there's a little bit of kind of damp coming through on the walls as well. So it's usually, you normally end up with one problematic wall. This is probably it for this house. course, being end of terrace, you've got one warm wall, which is your party wall to next door. Almost don't need to worry about that. They just found this picture out just to show me this is the terrace of cottages here with their one on the end. Now a lot of these, I think all the trees are gone now, but you can see this end gable was exposed stone, so that render is clearly not original that's up there now. So that's probably what the issue they had, and they kind of rendered this whole gable end. And then you can just about make out the front, all the exposed stone, which is still there now. Obviously the windows are changed, but the rest of it is fairly similar. No horse and cart now though. There's probably more to show here, but for now I can only really show you downstairs and the job that's kind of planned here. But it's really interesting property, a lot older than ours, lots going on, lots been kind of changed on it in the past, so hopefully that kind of gives you a little taste of what you can try and glean from bits and bobs in the house, what's original, what's not, and kind of start teaching yourself a little bit about kind of history of building. Okay, we're going to carry on kind of chatting about how they might approach their job here, but for now I'm going to leave it there. Hope you enjoyed. Any questions about this house, any of the building bits and bobs, then just stick them down below, but hopefully we'll be back soon to see what they've been up to. Thanks for watching. Remember, if you can, do it yourself, and we'll see you next time. Where did we say the wall was? Like that? There's one final feature in this house. It's an original Rubble fixing. That is it, that period charm.